Okay, well, my name is Robin Davis Sakula. I'm Vice President of Communications and Marketing at the Presbyterian Foundation. I'm a ruling elder in the PCUSA and member of Highland Presbyterian Church in Louisville, Kentucky. I had my own marketing firm for 15 years before joining the foundation in 2019. I'm going to be kicking things off today as we talk about socially responsible investing in the PCUSA. We've got a lot of great folks with us who are going to be presenting material. And I want to give you just a little bit of housekeeping so that you'll know how things will proceed here today. There is a comments box, I believe, and also a Q&A box. So if you have a question, please type that in the appropriate spot, and we will handle all of the questions at the end of the webinar. All our participants will stay with us, and we'll be able to take those questions. So I'm very excited about this, and our first panelist today will be Kerri Allen. She is Chair of Mission Responsibility through Investment and a representative for the Advocacy Committee for Women and Gender Justice on the committee. Reverend Allen is a Reformed womanist theologian. She is a PhD student and a hospital chaplain. She stays busy. And we're grateful for all of the time she puts into the denomination. She does incredible work. So we're going to kick it off to Kerri. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to kick us off with a prayer, an Iona prayer. So please join me in prayer. Creator of the cosmos, of eternity and time, be with us in this time. Savior of the world, healer of the nations, be with us in this place. Breath of all that lives, of people near and far, stir within our lives. Make your spirit, Jesus, God of here and now, be present with us as we learn today, that we may find new ways to be present in your world. Amen. And so to get us started, I know that there are often a lot of questions about what mission responsibility through investment is, and sometimes even misunderstandings. And so we've put together this quick video that will share a little bit more about MRTI and what we do.
What is MRTI? MRTI stands for the Committee on Mission Responsibility through Investment. Through MRTI, the Presbyterian Church pushes businesses to adopt practices that are not harmful to the environment, better for workers, prevent human trafficking, and more. These align with Presbyterian values and with how Christ calls us to take care of the world and each other. How does it work? MRTI is a committee created by the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church, whose members represent 6 GA-related entities. MRTI also has staff who handle most of the conversations conducted with businesses and their leadership. This is done through using the shares held in the portfolios of the Presbyterian Foundation and the Board of Pensions. Both of those agencies hold stock in companies to use the earnings to benefit the PCUSA through funding retirement beneficiaries and funding important mission work. Holding stock in a company gives a shareholder the unique ability to bring attention to key issues. How does MRTI choose the companies? Companies are selected because these companies have practices or policies that are out of alignment with PCUSA values. The investing agencies of the PCUSA hold stock in the companies. We work in coalitions to join forces with other faith and values-based investors. Does it work? Yes. Often companies do change their practices. MRTI has a rigorous process for evaluating select companies, color-coding companies after thoroughly researching their business practices. MRTI actions have successfully moved companies in the right direction many times since it started in 1972. Here are a few examples. helped bring pressure to end the apartheid regime in South Africa. Hotel chains and airlines have trained staff at all levels on how to spot and prevent human trafficking. Companies are committing to more transparency of their lobbying efforts related to climate change issues. What happens when it doesn't work? If a company doesn't respond to our letters, phone calls, and invitations to meet, MRTI may recommend that the agencies of the Presbyterian Church U.S.A. sell stock in the company and not buy any more stock in those companies. This is called divestment. This is an important tool, and it's the last tool of shareholder engagement. It is always our hope to influence corporations to be better actors for people and for the planet. When we walk away, we lose that influence. This may be warranted if companies make inadequate effort to change. But it is always our goal to cause lasting change in business practices that make a positive impact on people and planet. Want to know more? You can find more information on the MRTI website at presbyterianmission.org/MRTI.
Great. Are the slides up? Okay, great. So we are just gonna go through cover these things during our webinar, just doing an overview about MRTI and our process for engagement and divestment, and our partnership between MRTI and NCTC. We also are going to hear from NCTC and get an overview of what they do, and talk more about delve into more of our shared work and ministry. Next slide. So MRTI follows three foundational policies, including this policy that you see here from 1971, which outlined goals for Presbyterian investments in the 70s, starting in the 70s. These goals included the pursuit of peace, of racial justice, economic and social justice, achievement and environmental responsibility, and the pursuit of justice for women. So all of our work as a committee still falls under one of these goals. In 2023, we're more thoughtful about gender equity across genders, in addition to this pursuit of justice for women. And over the last few years, MRTI has focused most heavily on environmental responsibility as directed by the past three General Assemblies. Next slide. The established policy on socially responsible investing declared that no investment is neutral, and it echoed the priority areas of that 1971 policy. Next slide. So this policy that was adopted at the 196th General Assembly in 1984 and functioned as an important collaborative agreement between GA and investing agencies. It effectively creates the conditions that if divestment is done in this way, the investing agencies can implement it. The policy lays out these 7 criteria that you see here that must be met if MRTI discerns through our extensive process that we should make a selective divestment recommendation to the General Assembly. Next slide. The PCUSA is unique among faith-based investors because MRTI includes representatives from many areas: the mission arm, the advisory and advocacy committee, and the investment agencies. We're truly a committee of the General Assembly, as every one of the members is elected by the General Assembly, either directly or through the General Assembly's nominating committees process, like the 3 at-large members, or through the advocacy committees and advisory committees and the board of the 3 agencies. Faith-based investors, like the PCUSA, have a unique role in shareholder advocacy ecosystem and are often bringing emerging issues to companies that become major issues down the road. Next slide. As a Reformed theologian and ethicist, one of the best parts of chairing MRTI for me is that it's such an excellent representation of the best aspects of being Reformed and Presbyterian. We're called to be actively engaged and witness in the social sphere through this communal discernment and guidance from the Holy Spirit that undergird MRTI's work. MRTI recognizes the urgency of environmental and other social issues, just as we are experiencing with the climate crisis. Next slide. And I think we're going to shift now over to Rob Fohr to tell us more about MRTI background.
So I'm actually going to introduce Rob. I'm sure many of you know him, but I'm going to give just a very brief introduction. Rob Fohr is the Director of Faith-Based Investing and Corporate Engagement for the Presbyterian Church, U.S.A. He serves as the lead staff person for the PCUSA's Committee on Mission Responsibility through Investment. He is also a member of the New Covenant Trust Company's Board of Directors. So kick it off, Rob.
Thank you, Robin. Can we go to the next slide, please? Great, thank you. Kerri gave a great overview of kind of the history and the policies and the structure of MRTI. Now I'll move us into the next phase of our presentation here, talking a little bit about the Presbyterian Church, U.S.A. and socially responsible investing and how we do that through corporate engagement and shareholder advocacy. Next slide, please. So the tactics that in the kind of socially responsible investing universe are seen here in this slide. MRTI's primary activity is in the shareholder advocacy space. Next slide, please. Yeah, the ultimate goal of shareholder advocacy is to create a positive change within the companies, and MRTI engages companies on a variety of issues concerning the environment and climate change, healthcare and human rights, and banking and finance. Again, the goal is to, through our engagement with representatives from corporations that are key decision makers, we move companies more into the alignment with the values as articulated by the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church, U.S.A. Next slide, please. So here is an example of some companies that we've engaged in recent years concerning climate-related issues. As you can see, there are a variety of industries represented here, many of which are companies that have high greenhouse gas emissions profiles, that are either oil and gas companies on the supply side or are heavy users of fossil fuels, like the transportation industry, airline industry. And we have a couple of financial institutions, both on the banking side and the insurance or underwriting side. So we look at climate from a very comprehensive viewpoint. Next slide, please. So here's a little illustration about the MRTI shareholder engagement process, flowchart, if you will. MRTI's process begins with a GA policy or directive. Once MRTI identifies its priorities and work plan based on the GA directives, the committee then collaborates with our partners, researches companies, and corresponds with them. Now, if the company fails to respond or agree to a dialogue, or if the company's movement on a particular issue is deemed inadequate, then MRTI may file a shareholder resolution or a proposal. And so filing a shareholder proposal is a right that any investor has, as long as they meet certain criteria established by the Securities Exchange Commission, Rule 14A8. That is, the topic must be a major policy issue for the company. and it must not be overly prescriptive, and the investor has to have a certain amount of shares in the company for a certain amount of time. So this process, again, can kind of go back and repeat itself each year, often going from research to correspondence to dialogue and back again with the company, depending on the goals for each of the issues we're working on and with each particular company. This process can be sometimes messy and is almost always time consuming. And sometimes we get to a point where companies are either moving or they're not, or changes are happening or they're not happening. Next slide, please. So here's some examples of recent successful engagements. All of these companies that I'll talk about here and describe these engagements started with dialogues that went to shareholder proposals, and the shareholder proposals were withdrawn for a significant commitment from the company. So a lot of what we do is negotiating with companies on the substance of our shareholder proposal or ask, and then deciding whether the commitment they're making is deemed adequate enough to withdraw our proposal. If not, the proposal will go to vote in the company's proxy, which usually happens it's voted on at their annual stockholders meeting, which most often happens in kind of the late spring. So some additional information about these three companies. After years of engagement with AIG, a large insurer concerning climate change, and after filing several proposals, AIG released several commitments in March 2022, including net zero GHG emissions across underwriting and investment portfolios, use of the science-based emissions reductions targets, and no longer investing in or providing insurance of construction for any new coal-fired power plants, thermal coal mines, or oil sands. This moved them to become the leader amongst North American-based insurers. Other company here is MRTI started engagement with Dollar General in 2019 as part of a coalition of investors seeking more information on food retailers' chemical use and pesticides policies. After several dialogues and resolution, the company agreed to what we asked and expanded the list of chemicals in their restricted substances list. They expanded their restricted chemicals, and they agreed to join the Chemical Footprint Project in 2021, which is a best practice. Finally, American Airlines agreed last year to publish a lobbying report on how their direct and indirect lobbying on climate policy aligns or misaligns with their own climate-related goals. This was, again, the result of a successful shareholder proposal withdrawal negotiation. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk a few minutes about this, about the MRTI's recommendations to the last General Assembly. That was the assembly last summer, the 225th General Assembly in July and June of 2022. Next slide, please. So in responding, well, first let's start out that MRTI needed to respond to a directive from the 223rd General Assembly in 2018 that asked MRTI to do focused engagement and bring back possible selected divestment recommendations on and named 9 companies. And this was all related to the need to move as fast as possible on the issue of climate change. So you'll see here a direct quote from MRTI's report to the 225th General Assembly, and this quote really illustrates MRTI's thinking and its work in the climate-related space, knowing that the climate crisis is escalating very quickly and it is extremely urgent. Next slide, please. So the main recommendations of MRTI's report are included here, and one of which was adding 5 companies to the GA's divestment prescription list. And that was Chevron, Exxon, Mobil, Marathon Petroleum, Phillips 66, and Valero Energy. And another recommendation was to add new companies to MRTI's focus list, which include American Airlines, Delta Airlines, Enbridge, Kinder Morgan, Occidental Petroleum, PPL Corporation, and United Airlines. All these new companies are publicly traded. They're in the portfolios of the Board of Pensions and or the Presbyterian Foundation, and are included on a list of 166 companies with the largest greenhouse gas emissions profiles. Next slide, please. So to help guide MRTI's decision-making on which companies to continue, when a company is named by the General Assembly, to which companies to keep engaging and which companies to recommend divestment, MRTI has developed a guideline metrics framework, which was actually approved by the 223rd General Assembly. I know this is impossible to read. This is meant to illustrate the complex framework that this previous assembly approved. Companies are scored across 39 criteria with a possible total of 238 points. And we kind of divided up looking at environmental and social governance issues, but again, they're all weighted towards achieving the denomination's climate policies related to climate change and the environment. Next slide, please. So these were the final scores that were adopted by MRTI last January, about a year ago, which was in time for our recommendations to the General Assembly. The guideline metrics framework for the 9 companies that you see here were named by the previous General Assembly. And in 2022, the committee recommended adding companies scoring in the red and orange, so the lowest 2 tiers, to the General Assembly for consideration to be put on the divestment prescription list. Let's move to the next slide, please. So these were the results of the 225th General Assembly. MRTI's report passed with over 90% of the vote. The divestment recommendations, so again, that was adding the 5 companies to the divestment prescription list. And these recommendations now go to, or then went to the boards of the investing agencies for consideration. And they will be included, and the 5 companies will be included are included in this year's, the 2023 divestment prescription list. Next slide, please. And here is a peek at the divestment list, and this is available on MRTI's website. It includes 123 companies, and its areas are military or weapons related, tobacco, for-profit prisons, human rights, and now the environment. Next slide, please. And back to you, Robin.
Thank you very much. We are getting questions, by the way, in the Q&A, and if we can answer them simply, we are. If they demand a little bit more time, we'll handle them in the question and answer at the end. So thank you to everyone for participating there. Also check the chat. We're adding some links for materials and things that you might find helpful or interesting as we go. The next speaker today will be Reverend Jihyun. She is Director of the Mid-Council Ministries for the Presbyterian Church, U.S.A. for the Office of the General Assembly. She is a teaching elder member of Greater Atlanta Presbytery and a member of New Covenant Trust Company's Board of Directors. So we'll hear from Jihyun now.
Thanks, Robin. So MRTI and New Covenant Trust Company, or NCTC, has a working partnership that includes people, collaborations, as well as sharing of resources. And so the working partnership includes staff collaboration, staff support, NCTC staff support of MRTI, as well as an NCTC board member who serves on MRTI. And through this shared support, the work of keeping the investments of the New Covenant Trust Company closely aligned as a part of the foundation, closely aligned with General Assembly actions is ensured. And these actions, as you heard before, are the communal discernment and actions by elected commissioners from our presbyteries. And it ensures that our financial stewardship and our financial resources are stewarded in such a way that our commitments to God's love and justice witnessed in the life, ministry, and death of Jesus Christ and the resurrection of Jesus Christ is reflected in the ways in which we use our investment resources. And so in order to keep that alignment close, there is that required extensive engagement. And so MRTI provides negative screening guidance through the divestment and prescription list that you've heard about. It also MRTI shares engagement information with NCTC. It shares the guideline metrics with NCTC, and also helps NCTC to understand and interpret the General Assembly policy so that it can then be applied through investment choices and guidance. And NCTC also then shares the environmental, social, and corporate governance analysis that's provided by third-party investment folks. So that partnership then, again, while MRTI doesn't hold the investments, helps the investment bodies, including New Covenant Trust Company, to be aligned with Presbyterian commitments and our values that are really a way of living out our faithful stewardship. Back to you, Robin.
Thanks very much. Our next presenter will be Greg Rousos, who is president of New Covenant Trust Company and executive vice president and chief operating officer of the Presbyterian Foundation. He is a certified public accountant and a certified financial planner. Oh, and by the way, we're getting some notes that the chat might be disabled. And Nathan, if you can take a look at that and see if we can enable that, that would be great. Thank you. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Hey, great. Thanks, Robin. This is great. Thanks for allowing me to be with you today. I'm going to share just a brief overview of New Covenant Trust Company in case you do not know who New Covenant Trust Company is. So if we could go to the next slide, you'll see that New Covenant Trust Company, our passion and our call is to serve congregations, serve institutions of the PCUSA, and to serve individuals, members within the PCUSA. And our call within that is really to help people be good stewards with investments that they are entrusted with. And so we come alongside and help congregations, institutions, and others with investment management in accordance with the values, the witness of the PCUSA. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of the Presbyterian Foundation. The foundation is a national agency of the PCUSA. And so we are part of the church. And because we're part of the church, we share your faith, we share your values. We are also a limited purpose national trust bank. We are chartered and regulated by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. And that simply means that we are held to the highest standards that any financial institution or any bank would be held to in regards to information security, adhering to policies, documents, those kinds of things. So hopefully that instills trust and instills confidence in you that we are held to those standards. We have just a talented group of people that are passionate about the church, care deeply about the church and its ministry, but also have the qualifications that would rival, I would say, any investment management trust firm out there. We have CPAs, CFPs, CFAs, the laundry list of alphabets, letters in there, and then attorneys and other folks on staff who are called simply to help you be good steward of your assets. Our priority always is to serve well, take good care of our clients. And again, we provide trust and investment management services. We would enjoy talking to you about any investment questions that you might have, any trust or financial planning questions that you might have. You can do that by going to our website, newcovenanttrust.com or presbyterianfoundation.org. Leave a message, we'll get the message, and we'll be happy to follow up. So thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Robin.
Thank you very much. Just learned that the chat is active, but the chat options only go to the panelists, just so you know. So that is now activated. So if you do have questions or things, please do put those in the Q&A. We can read those and we're responding to them as we are able. The next speaker will be James Kerri. He is Director of Investment and Portfolio Management Services for New Covenant Trust Company. He assists with all aspects of trust investment committees, research, monitoring, and due diligence functions, macroeconomic analysis, and multi-asset strategy positioning. He also oversees the securities trading function of the firm. We're going to turn it over to James now. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Robin, and hello, everyone. Good to be with you. Thank you for your time and attention on this webinar. it looks like we are decently on time so far, so that's good news. We will get through this and look forward to the Q&A. On the next slide, I'll just start my presentation. You know, as Robin mentioned, I'm James Kerri, Director of Investments for the Trust Company. I do a lot of the sort of daily investment strategy, investment research for our investment committee. I also do a lot of the responsible investing and values-based investing research for the Trust Company. So really happy to be going over this topic with you and looking forward to a great presentation. One thing I will say is if we don't get to your question, or if you think of something later, you know, please do know, as Greg mentioned, New Covenant Trust Company, the foundation, is here to work with you all, to present to you, to discuss these issues with you anytime. So please do reach out if we can be helpful to these topics, even down the road. We'd be absolutely happy to. So I thought we'd just start with a little bit of what is responsible investing. And I think this is a really helpful chart because this is from the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investment. And on the right side of this chart, you'll see things that you can do as an investor once you own shares in a company, once you are a shareholder. And this is why we're so lucky as a denomination to have MRTI, an organization as sort of organized and with the history of MRTI to really take care of the right side of this chart for us. On the left side are things you can do when you're building a portfolio, when you're selecting securities and investments to put into your portfolio. I like to say that we use every tool that we have available to us as responsible investors. It's not just negative screening, which many people are familiar with, but any tool that we have to drive change, to get companies' attention, to, you know, push companies towards being better citizens, corporate citizens. We use those tools, and you'll see each of them listed here. Negative screening in the middle there. People are pretty familiar with what that is, but also positive integration or positive screening, which is measuring companies on proactive or positive metrics and investing in the best in-class companies in each industry. And then thematic or impact investing, which is a very interesting and rapidly evolving area of the industry, seeking not only to make an investment that earns a market rate of return, but also doing so in such a way that that investment is driving a measurable positive or environmental impact. So you may be financing renewable energy infrastructure, for example, or you may be helping to finance affordable housing, apartments, or that sort of building or real estate. So that's also an example of ways that investors can drive impact and be responsible investors. We incorporate all those elements into our research and our portfolios. On the next slide, we'll just begin looking at a few examples here. So negative screening, again, that's the one that people tend to be most familiar with, the divestment of industries or companies that are just inherently incompatible with an investor's values. It may be assault weapons or handguns or military contractors, for-profit prisons, tobacco companies. Negative divestment is often viewed as a last resort, as it will end your ability to engage with that company, to vote your shares as a shareholder. But it is an important strategy to have, an important tool to have. One example of a negative screening strategy, we do have the New Covenant Trust Company fossil fuel free strategy. So this was a strategy developed in 2015, actually. We had a church that provided the seed capital for that strategy, which we're very thankful for. Thought it was important that churches and Presbyterians around the country had an option to be fossil fuel free if that was desired. And so that strategy has been running now for a number of years, over 5 or 6 years. We've been very happy that it's been able to achieve the goals that we seek out as responsible investors, to not only apply the responsible investing values into the investment, but also to earn market rates of return. And so we've been very happy with that strategy over time. On the next slide, we'll go into the positive screening or positive integration strategy. So this is a little newer and maybe newer to some attendees. This is where you evaluate companies on positive metrics or positive proactive things that they're doing, and really ranking companies and investing or overweighting for investment best-in-class companies within each industry. One example of this investing strategy is the NCTC Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategy, which has been in place for almost 2 years now. And that rates companies on 8 or 9 metrics: board and management diversity, non-discrimination policies at the corporate level, measures to promote equal opportunity and diversity. It measures a company's supply chain, both on their human rights and their labor rights conditions in the supply chain. It measures their climate change strategy at the corporate level and measures their community involvement. And it's really only the top tier companies that make it into the portfolio for that specific strategy. And on the next slide, we'll see that the strategy does result in companies on average that have 76% higher levels of diverse executives than the index average in that portfolio, 42% higher levels of diverse board members, 38% higher levels of women executives, and 25% higher levels of women board members than the index average. And what we've really been excited about as it relates to this portfolio is in 2022, we'll talk about in a moment, particularly difficult investing environment. But the companies in this portfolio held up better than the index on a number of measures, and the portfolio is doing really well, even in this difficult environment. So, we continue to look for evidence that incorporating, that these metrics reflect strongly managed companies, strong companies. And we have seen in the very near term that this portfolio has proved more resilient than its benchmark in the very near term. And we're keeping a close eye on that. So on the next slide, we'll just cover an example of the final tool that we have available: impact investing, sometimes referred to as thematic investing. And this is just an example of an impact investment that we've participated in through Praxis Funds, a mutual fund partner of New Covenant Trust Company. They're associated with the Mennonite Church in Northern Indiana. And we made an investment through them in the Community Reinvestment Fund out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Just an example of some of the work that this fund is doing. There was a small business loan made to Urban Roots Incorporated, a landscaping, snow removal, and janitorial services company in Chicago. The company was started about 10 years ago. The owner and his wife started the company. He was having trouble career-wise based on some criminal history and things like that. And the company grew steadily over 10 years, but really was beginning to reach that point where they needed capital investment, they needed bigger trucks, they needed more workers, and be able to bid on some of the bigger projects. Got a $140,000 small business loan from CRF, and 2 years later, revenues were up 328%. So over tripled the sales for that company in 2 years' time. So obviously, this was a good investment. That's a good loan based on the business success of that company, but it's also driving job growth, small business entrepreneurship, and impact there in Chicago. So just one of many examples of impact investing being applied. Next slide. So we're going to pivot now a bit to market recap. The reason why we're covering this is because it is our belief that responsible investing should be good investing. These should be good portfolios. They should be able to stack up with any portfolio of any particular strategy, even though you're being a responsible investor, even though you're incorporating your values into your investment. It's our view that responsible investing should be only additive to the investment. It should not be any sort of trade-off. But it's return is being exchanged for being a responsible investor. In our view, you can earn every bit of a market return while being a responsible investor, while being consistent with your values and with your witness as an investor. So this is just an example, a long time sort of sustainable investment proxy, the ESG Select ETF. And it's just a good example of how we view responsible investing. On the 1 year, you'll see it's negative relative to its benchmark. On the 3 year, it's positive. We do believe that over time, there will be some variance. Now tobacco companies are doing well, or now they're doing poorly, whatever the case may be. Fossil fuels have been in that category recently. But over long periods of time, you build the investment in such a way that it closely earns market returns, just like any other investment. And you'll see that this investment over the 10 years, as you go all the way out on average, within 0.02% of that benchmark. It could be plus or minus, but that close tracking, we think absolutely can be achieved even while incorporating responsible investing. So we do believe you can do well while doing good. In fact, you should do well while you're doing good. And we do believe that as a responsible investor, you can and should also be a good investor. So we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. Looking back, to 2022, it was a miserable year, no matter what kind of investor you were in markets. So this chart, right to left, you'll see stock returns. Top to bottom, you'll see bond returns. And you'll see that red 2022, bottom left quadrant, perhaps, depending on how you measure it, the worst year for a balanced portfolio between stocks and bonds, at least since the 1930s. A few themes that drove that difficult environment for 2022. One, you'll notice valuations were very stretched. So on the right side of those high stock returns, you'll see 2019, 2020, and 2021. 3 years in a row where stock returns were greater than 20%. We were heading into 2022 with a stock chart that looked kind of like this. And anytime you see a vertical sort of asset price, it's something to keep an eye on, maybe indicating really stretched valuations or even bubbly conditions. So some of 2022 was price correction, but at the same time, we had inflation, historic generational levels of inflation, which drove historic rapidly increasing interest rates. Sort of like interest rates are sort of like gravity on the stock market, and interest rates were ramped up, cranked way up very quickly. And so inflation drove rising interest rates, which really made the environment very difficult for asset prices, both stocks and bonds in 2022. Russia's invasion of Ukraine did not help anybody, whether it be the supply chain, the inflation dynamics, uncertainty in the economy. And so a number of conditions that just made it be a particularly difficult year for investors. On the next slide, we will see, though, that it's not all doom and gloom in our view. One of the things is, number one, valuations have corrected. There has been a decent amount of pain priced into markets at these levels, particularly in the bond market, where we think a lot of the pain has been priced in at this point. Another thing we're keeping in mind is this chart on the left shows, markets go up and down, but 75% of calendar years, markets have been positive. 25% of the years, they've been negative. If you look on the far left, you'll see that there's been 6 or 7 years where markets are down more than 20%, more than negative 20%. But there's over 30 years where markets are up more than 20%. So there is some asymmetry in, yes, it's been a particularly bad year in 2022, but our long-term view, our medium-term view is much more constructive for returns for investors. There are recessionary risks. So anytime interest rates are elevated and monetary conditions are restrictive, there are, risks that those tight monetary conditions could lead to a growth slowdown. Again, we have seen a decent amount of pain priced into markets, but there is, clouds still hanging over markets and the economy. It is our view, though, that opportunities do exist. For a long time, it was technology stocks, the same 5 or 6 big technology stocks that were driving markets, but there's a lot more opportunities now in markets. You'll see in different industries and sectors that had previously been really beaten down by markets. We're beginning to see some opportunities. And one thing that we haven't seen in a very long time is income being back in short-term investments, safe investments. If you think of money markets or CDs, we're seeing interest rates above 4%. So we'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. Opportunities for investors in this market, income, short-term income is one of those. So finally, just a couple of practical tips for investors in this environment. Number one, only make significant changes to your investment and your allocation if there are changes to your situation, not based on near-term volatility. Most of our investors are very long-term investors, decades plus, multi-decade investors. If you've calibrated an investment plan to your time horizon, if you're a long-term investor, only make significant changes to that allocation if there's a change to your situation, not because of a quarter's return or 1 year's return. You'll see on the left side of this slide a very famous chart, common chart, that just shows the impact of making ill-timed market timing decisions. This shows $1,000 that was invested over 30 years in the S&P 500. 1,000 grew to 26,000. But if you missed the 5 best days of market returns, if you just missed one, it's one market week of the best days in the market, that $26,000 of wealth accumulation was only 16,000 by missing those best days. So we recommend not trying to jump around, not trying to time the market, but really trying to, remain invested, remain disciplined in your investment plan. Evaluate opportunities. There are a few areas that we are, considering as attractively priced in certain industries or sectors of the market. Again, there is this rotation from big tech that drove markets for a long time. Now we're seeing a lot more sort of diversified opportunities, even globally and outside of the U.S., where some valuations remain even more attractive. And finally, we would point out, work closely with your financial professional. So now's really the time where your financial professional should be, earning their relationship with you. There are, years where the market's up 25%, things are all great, everything's going well. Now's really the time where that close collaboration, where sort of the advice and the assistance that we can provide you now that the seas are much choppier, it's really important, I think, to receive that sort of professional advice. And so we would, always recommend in environments like this, closely collaborating with your financial professional, making sure they have all the information they need to give you great advice on how to navigate these difficult markets. Finally, just on the last slide, I'll wrap up by pointing out there are a few additional resources. And I'm sorry, we'll be right here. There are a few additional resources. The Along the Road podcast from the OGA recently featured Greg Rousos as the special guest and talking about responsible investing, a great podcast. I easily found that, so you should be able to find that wherever you get your podcasts. There's also a book, Faithful Investing, that was edited by a member of the Episcopal Church Foundation. Greg Rousos also wrote the first couple chapters of that book. It's a great ecumenical view of faithful investing, of responsible investing, and that's also just an additional resource as well. On the final slide, we'll just mention that we are also here to serve. Whether it's the investment part that you need help with, or if it's the responsible investing part that you'd like to learn more about, absolutely reach out to New Covenant Trust Company. We'll get somebody involved to assist you on your specific situation. You can also reach out to the Presbyterian Foundation and reach out to your ministry relations officer through the Presbyterian Foundation as well, if you'd prefer that route for more resources. So we were on time and now we're a little behind, but I will turn it back to Robin. Really do appreciate you all being here and looking forward to answering any questions that I can. Thank you.
Hi there. It's great to have seen this presentation live. We've been talking about it for quite a while. And we've got a lot of great questions. I'm really grateful for all the, you are a highly intelligent audience, and you just have great questions for us. I'm gonna handle these in chronological order because I think that's probably only fair. And we're gonna start with a question that I believe would go to you, Rob. And this is from Robert, and I hope I don't pronounce your last name wrong, but I believe it's Kathy or Cathay, I'm not sure, who is at McCormick Seminary. Some recent researchers in political science have questioned whether sanctions work with various international entities. For example, Russia has adapted to the sanctions regime of other nations and continues to export oil and gas. Is now a good time to rethink an approach to social justice that is so heavily dependent on divestment, sanctions, and public statements? So, for example, what about targeted investment as a strategic approach?
Thanks for that question. What I will say to this is that we are guided by the General Assembly's policies on whatever policy statements they are making, and those that relate to our lane, which is shareholder advocacy through the investments held in portfolios of the Board of Pensions or Foundation. So as you probably know, or you may know, the General Assembly has endorsed over the years kind of lowercase BD&S, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, over the years at certain times. When certain criteria are met, certain circumstances are, that the Assembly deems it's warranted. With respect to Russia, what has really been what we've been most active in is, again, engaging with North American domiciled companies that have proximity to human rights violations. And a lot of these are tech companies whose products are maybe used for non-peaceful pursuits in Russia's conflict and Russia's attack of Ukraine. And what we're kind of pushing them towards is more disclosure around basically on doing more due diligence. We call it know your customer due diligence. So what you're producing, you ensure that it doesn't wind up in the hands of a regime like Russia, or used by the Chinese government in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, or in Myanmar, or a host of other places. So that's kind of how we think about it. We think about it very much on the advocacy side. And then if companies aren't moving after a period of time, and we can show that we have adequate policy in place, then potentially selective divestment recommendations are made. But that's a long process. I think Kerri wants to comment on this as well.
Thanks for that. The other thing that I want to share is that this is, that there are multiple tools and tactics that are used in social justice movements, and MRTI is one of those avenues. It's not that one thing or another should be done. It's that there's always space for multiple kinds of tools and tactics. So I don't think that has to be mutually exclusive from what you shared, Bob. And also, when we look at it from a historical perspective, as someone who was a product of interracial couple that was married pre-Loving versus Virginia and active in the civil rights movement, I recognize what a long process that was, right? So it's not that I think there's a sense of wanting things to happen very urgently. And we understand in this climate crisis that there is some urgent needs, but then there is also that process that happens over time. And we are very process oriented folks. And so that's kind of the role of MRTI, but that does not exclude other parts of the church, or for us as individuals to be engaged in different ways.
Thank you. That's great. And we have another question from Bob. I'm just going to call you Bob because Kerri did. In response to the BDS movement in Illinois concerning Israel-Palestine issues, legislation was brought before the state legislature and passed that states that if a vendor with contracts in the state of Illinois will not do business with entities of the state of Israel, then Illinois will cancel those contracts. Other states have passed similar legislation, and a bill has been brought before Congress to do the same on a national level. How does MRTI respond to counter divestment strategies by public bodies like the state of Illinois and other U.S. states?
Again, thanks for that question. So the MRTI works with several coalitions of other faith-based and values-based investors that have a concern around some of these laws that are being enacted or being considered, and that also goes to there's also anti-ESG in general legislation that's being proposed. There are attorneys general opinions on those. And so MRTI is connected with these broader coalitions, investor coalitions that are thinking about that these very issues and how best to move forward, basically, and in certain circumstances, speak out. So that's kind of generally, I would say. With what MRTI does, again, MRTI has a fairly narrow lane, and we do the implementation of the GA policies and do that in conversation with our investing agencies. And whenever it comes to action, whether we are going to engage with the company, do advocacy, or again think about potentially selective divestment, there are a series of processes and policies that we have to make sure that are in place, lined up, and we follow those, as Kerri mentioned, very closely, and bring everybody on board, so that we are kind of constantly balancing the need to be faithful to our social witness policy of the church, and the need to be kind of in line with what can be done by our investment agencies, and ensure that they are in line with their legal obligations.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. The next question I'm going to let Greg Rousos handle. Greg and Rob, as you know, there are significant attacks on investors who are integrating the issues MRTI and the church champions into their investment and engagement decisions, arguing that this is a violation of their fiduciary responsibility. Do you hear such questions or criticisms often, and are there any good responses that you can share? So Greg, I'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks, Robin. And boy, these are wonderful questions. Thanks for asking them, and I'll let if Rob or James or Jihyun Kerri want to enter into this discussion as well. This is a lengthy, could be a lengthy response, so I'm not going to get into it. I'll just share a couple of points, and if anybody wants to engage in more discussion about this, let us know. But we do track this. We track the ESG commentary that is out there, that's really being propagated by some of the attorney generals, some of the state attorney generals. And really what I would say is, as we look at fiduciary duty, we look at it a little bit differently than maybe what the state attorney general looks at it. State attorneys generals looks at it. They look at it solely from a financial return perspective. But I would even say, if you looked at James's slide earlier, you really can do well by doing good. And we don't believe you sacrifice financial return by investing in accordance with ESG. But even if you set that aside, we believe there are three responsibilities of a fiduciary. There's a duty of due care, a duty of loyalty, and a duty of obedience. And what that means to us is it's more than financial return. There's a duty of loyalty, a duty of obedience to the mission of the organization that you're serving. You have a ministry, and that ministry has a social justice impact to it, right? That needs to be considered as you are considering your investments. You need to consider financial return, but you also need to be faithful to your ministry and to the social justice work of that ministry. So ESG, we believe, is important to consider, and it does not compromise your fiduciary duty. We also don't think it compromises your ability to achieve a market rate of return either in your portfolio. So I don't know if Kerri or James or Rob or Jihyun want to add anything to that, but that would be what I would say, Robin.
The only thing I would add is that the Presbyterian Church has been doing responsible investing long before ESG was ever a concept. So this is, and we do, continue, as Kerri mentioned, continue to be faithful for those original mission goals from 1971.
Right.
Thank you. I want to address one other thing while I have your attention. You may have seen that in one of the slides that MRTI presented that there was some text that was crossed out. I'm afraid that's my fault. There was a final version of the slides that was sent to me yesterday, and I did not forward those on to Nathan. That's my bad. And you will get a final version of those slides when we send up a follow-up email. We will send you the correct version. So. We have a question here from Lynn Gulick, who's at First Presbyterian in Ann Arbor, who wants to know if we would like to come and talk to them about responsible investing. Yes, Lynn, we're happy to do that. And this goes the same for other groups. Just get in touch with us and we'll be happy to talk to you about it. Easiest way probably is to send, you could probably send anybody here. The email pattern is first name dot last name at presbyterianfoundation.org. So you could send Greg an email, or James, or whoever you like, or me, whatever you like. We're glad to do it. Now we have a question from Phil Hunter. Now that Rob Fohr has explained how companies get on the divestment list, what is the process to remove a company from the divestment list? We anticipated this question, and we have some slides to talk about that. Nathan is going to pull those up now, and Rob will address that.
Sure. Thank you very much for that question. So again, didn't want to do this in the main presentation, but I thought it usually comes up. So what is the, I'll go over the divestment process one more time. So next slide, please. So again, the Presbyterian Church uses a phase selected divestment process. It is based in this policy that Kerri mentioned on the outset of our presentation. It includes 7 criteria. And this is, I encourage you all it's on our website to read it in its full form. It's very long, it's long-winded. This is the distilled down 7 points, but you can see them here. So we need to go through the MRTA needs to go through these 7 criteria before a divestment recommendation could possibly be advanced to the General Assembly. So once we go through all these, and again, number 2 requires extensive engagement. 3, thorough analysis, co-determination, define goals. 5 and 7, the criterion 5 and 7 have a lot to do with engagement with the communities that are affected by the issue, as well as the communities that may be affected by a divestment of a certain company. So, for example, we spent a lot of time in Texas since 2018, where a lot of these oil and gas companies are domiciled, meeting with Presbyterians who work in the oil and gas industry, and making sure they understand the process, and just keeping communication lines very open. And then we talked about for 6, the guideline metrics framework are quintessential, or are absolutely essential for that to meet that criteria. Next slide, please. So again, this is the process. The General Assembly considers the recommendation from MRTI through the Presbyterian Mission Agency Board, and then if the General Assembly agrees with it. So again, to have a divestment recommendation be implemented, 2 things have to happen. MRTI has got to make a recommendation per that policy that I just showed you, and number 2, the General Assembly has to agree to it. So once they agree to that, then MRTI constructs the list for the following year. It goes to the boards of the investment agencies. Then they take action on it. Next slide, please. Okay, that's that. And then here's the list that went into effect earlier this month. It was prepared last fall. This is, again, the repository of all the General Assembly related policies and the companies that are currently not meeting them or out of alignment with them. So the vast majority of them are weapons, military or weapons related, and it's again not all companies that have contracts with the Department of Defense or produce weapons, but there are certain criteria that have to be met, and it's included in this policy. And I invite you to look at that. Okay, so then the companies go on here and they stay on there until, please go to the next slide. Until if and when we learn that there is in that outside circle there, if there's reason to believe the company has changed or is no longer in the business that was or doing that, participating in the activity that was controversial or that was problematic or out of alignment with GA policy. If that is the case, then we recommend to the General Assembly to take that company off the list. So it takes an action of the General Assembly, and that there is a company, at least one, that MRTI will recommend taking off at the next assembly.
It's also, thanks. It's also important to remember that divestment is a tool that we use to try to seek change So our end goal is not divestment. So if there's a change, if the company makes a change, then that's a positive thing, because that's what the goal is for us to see a change. So in order to be removed from that list, they do that, but they would have to align with our policies. But just remember that is also a positive thing.
Thank you very much. I'm glad we were prepared to answer that. We're running over our hour, so I'm going to kind of condense a little bit and try to get to some questions that I think that we can be helpful with. There's a question from Irvin Richards about, are there more examples of impact investing? Irvin, let's talk about that a little bit more. If you will drop me an email, I will be glad to help you with that. It's Robin, ROBYN .Sekula, SEKULA at presbyterianfoundation.org. Please send me an email. We'll follow up. Dan is asking about what fraction of the portfolios remains in fossil fuels as represented by example of the carbon underground 200 list. We really cannot answer that here today. That is not information that I have on hand at this moment. We have a question from David Mullins that I think is something that Greg can handle. Can you explain how New Covenant Funds relates to NCTC? What does NCTC do beyond New Covenant Funds?
Great. Thank you, Robin. Good question. New Covenant Funds is a separate series of mutual funds. It's an open-ended mutual fund complex that individuals, institutions can invest in directly. It follows the social witness principles of the General Assembly of the Church, which is the divestment list. So it would not hold whatever the GA puts on the divestment list. And that's a mutual fund complex, separate and distinct from New Covenant Trust Company. New Covenant Trust Company, we invest according to a client's goals, objectives, and values. So we construct portfolios for you based on how you want to invest, and then we will comply with that. So we have some clients that want to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We will construct portfolios for that. We have some clients that want to focus on fossil fuel free. We have portfolios for that. So we will use either individual stock portfolios, or we will use mutual funds to build client portfolios. We have an open architecture, so we choose best in class mutual funds, exchange traded funds, whatever it may be, to construct our client portfolios. We do use New Covenant funds in New Covenant Trust Company portfolios when that matches a client's objectives and values. So that's the difference, Robin, between the two. And again, happy to engage with more questions or answer however we can, if helpful.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you said that, because I have another question for you. There's one more here from Phil Hunter, and I think this will be relatively easy to answer. Am I to assume with this discussion of actions by individual companies and MRTI's evaluations of those actions that NCTC investments are in individual companies and not mutual funds?
It can be in both. It really depends on the client's objectives. So we can build out a separately managed portfolio of individual stocks, or we can utilize mutual funds. Again, it's all based on what's best for the client.
Great. I know that some of our panelists have another meeting to go to, and by some of them, I mean me and a couple of others of us. But I'm going to ask this one last question. If it's urgent that some others of you need to go, I certainly understand. But here's a good one. I believe ESG ratings allow an investor to select best-in-class companies per sector or industry while maintaining a diversified portfolio by having high and low ESG companies in each sector or industry. As a counter, the fossil fuel-free portfolio would stand to remove an industry altogether. How does either MRTI or NCTC evaluate sectors or industries as a whole, either to overweight or underweight that sector industry from a wider ESG point of view? Wow, that's a great question.
James, would you like to start, and then maybe Rob or whoever could chime in?
Yeah, well, great question. I would say to put some of it back on Rob and Kerri, it's one of the reasons why we're so reliant upon MRTI, because, there are some industries that we don't invest in our responsible investing portfolios, specifically in the military arena, for-profit prisons, for example. And so while there are some industries that would be fully divested, I think a lot of this comes from the General Assembly and from MRTI. And so we really rely upon the denomination for that type of guidance, and then implement the portfolio from there.
And James, I will say that we do subscribe to several databases that have diversity scores and metrics that help us to, so if somebody were to come to us and say, we want a diversity, equity, and inclusion focused portfolio with best-in-class companies, we subscribe to data sets that provide us with those metrics, right, to build those portfolios.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the, to your question before, Greg, it's one of the things that NCTC specifically can do for investors is, make this customized to you. Each church, each congregation, each investor can tell us that they want to be divested from this industry, and we can customize that for specific, investors. But broadly, we tend to rely upon the denomination and MRTI specifically for that guidance.
Yeah, and I would add, Jihyun did a great job articulating this partnership between NCTC and MRTI, and that is a real value add for I think the denomination writ large, but also MRTI and I would say clients of NCTC, as we're able to share information, share data sets. MRTI is able to kind of look at the policy from the policy guidance from the GA, and bring that down to a granular level around industries or companies. And then we have a lot of open dialogue and conversation with our colleagues at NCTC, and really think it's again a really strong partnership, and it makes all of our work stronger.
Absolutely.
Thank you to everybody who attended today. We've gotten some wonderful comments. We're very grateful for everybody who attended. If we did not get to your question today, if we didn't answer it in a satisfactory way, if you didn't get to answer it, ask your question live. Please feel free to email us and ask us questions. We'd love to talk about this stuff. And if you send your question to me, I'll route it to the right person. But thanks to everybody, and thanks to our panelists.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Great to be with you all.
Okay.